The corporate shills are in full panic mode as Disney is imploding. The potential liability, the legal ramifications, the financial ramifications are coming home for Disney. And as this happens, the media is going crazy. They're panicking. They're putting out all sorts of stories to cover for Disney. They're putting all sorts of excuses out for Disney. They're making things up about the law. And let me tell you guys, there is no exception to how far and who is going to come out here and shill for Disney. And so today we're going to get on one specific type of shill. The big corporate shill, the big money shill that's going to come out here and kind of step behind Disney in a way that they seem like they're, hey, we're pro-business, we're maybe libertarian, we're freedom-oriented with quotation marks, and that's why we support Disney here. And that's always been this weird segment of people. This kind of folks that normally would caucus, you would think, with more people on the right side of the aisle, people that are pro-business, people that might be in favor of, let's say, keeping the state open during a crisis. Yeah, what state did that? Oh yeah, I think it was this state that had this governor, and it might have been Florida. Yeah, so you'd think people would be in favor of that, but no. The thing is, there's a difference between big business and people with big, ultra high net worth and the average Joe and the small business person. And I firmly believe that small businesses have been under attack and continue to be under an attack. In this Disney case, it's not just about Disney. It's about big business versus small business. It's about fairness and treating all businesses fairly, whether they're large or whether they're small, and treating everybody equitably under the law. No business, no matter how big, no person, no matter how much money they have, is above the law. So there was one particular corporate shill that I thought, this is perfect for me to highlight how they're coming up with this position that Florida is anti-business. They're making these anti-business arguments, and to really debunk this. And surprisingly, it's actually Andrew Henderson of Nomad Capitalist who put out a recent video on Florida being anti-business. Now, full disclosure on Andrew Henderson, Nomad Capitalist. Andrew Henderson is a person who focuses his business on helping ultra high net worth individuals. So high net worth millionaires and billionaires, people who have an extremely, are at the top of the top of the top of the top in the West, helping them leave the West, give up their American passports and get passports and citizenship elsewhere. And of course, we're talking about folks that have enough money to straight up just buy citizenship in another country. Often that'll cost $1 million, $1 million plus. There are some programs for a little bit less. But typically we're talking super high net worth individuals. This individual is not going to be helping you if you have a six-figure income. That is not enough. If you're the average Joe, he's not going to help you get out. And in full disclosure, because I do need to be honest, unlike the shills, I am always going to be 100% transparent. I also do help people and have another channel dedicated to helping people leave the U.S. It's called Go East Gentlemen. And I talk about leaving for Asia. I'm specifically in Asia. In fact, right now I'm filming this from a Bangkok hotel room, and I'm over all around in Asia. I'm in Japan, Korea, Malaysia, Vietnam, Singapore, Philippines, wherever people want to go. But I'm trying to help the average everyday guy, and I just thought it's so ironic that, people who really could be giving, advice in the same field, we end up butting heads, because at the end of the day, big business and small business, they're clashing, not just in America, but around the world. The interests of the everyday man, the interests of the common man, the person who, let's say, is out here selling fruit in Bangkok, or, selling fish cakes in Korea, or a ramen shop in Osaka, or the guy who's selling burgers, or tacos in America at that taco stand, right? Those guys are fighting with the big chains and the big business. And there's certain people that want to get behind big business because they've got everything on the line. So let's listen up to Andrew Henderson's points here when he tries to talk about Florida as anti-business. And I'm going to react to those as we go here. So let's proceed.
But what I'm going to tell you is, I believe that what's happening in Florida should shake you if you are a business person. And that is that Ron DeSantis, for months, has had this childlike high school bully fascination.
Okay, so of course this is So just starting out, when we talk about framing DeSantis as a bully is very much a Disney narrative sort of thing. That's very much how they would like to frame this. Versus, hey, a corporation, right, which has received extraordinary benefits, which has a special district, which has powers that nobody else has in the state of Florida, that can do things that nobody else can do, and looking to sunset those clauses, which frankly should have been sunsetted a long time ago. Bullying and saying this bully narrative, I think that's a false narrative here, particularly since it is Disney. Disney is no small entity. They are no mom and pop. In fact, based on the framing of the federal lawsuit, it seems to me like Disney wants to say, we don't have to listen to the people. That the everyday people, the everyday man that votes in your legislature, yeah, we're above that. Corporations are above your legislature. Think about that. Think about what that says particularly in red states. If giant woke corporations can come into Texas, can come into Florida, and just take over, that's a good thing? That's pro-freedom? I don't think so. And once again, this framing from Andrew, very pro-Disney, and obviously it's coming from a Disney media playbook.
With going after the Walt Disney Company because he disagrees with them on the politics of the former CEO that was led by some of Disney's employees.
So let's be clear here. It wasn't about the politics of the former CEO. It was about an official company. There was an official company statement, right, which was very much adopted by the company as a whole. So let's be clear. I don't want to put this solely on Chapek. I think and that's another Disney thing, trying to put everything on Chapek and scapegoat Chapek. So Iger comes in here as a white knight. Let's not let him off the hook. And mind you, Iger was there the entire time.
So I've been a business owner my entire life. I do not want the government anywhere that I live to be able to take away my rights to operate my business how I want. And that is exactly...
So, understood, completely understood. But how short-sighted is it to say this and then forget about the pandemic? And then just go, oh yeah, well, that didn't happen, right? You know? Yeah, that, like, masks are cool, right? But paying your fair share of taxes, no, that's not, right? We should actually allow small businesses to pay those instead of the big business, right? Disney should be exempted from paying their fair share for roads, for improvements, for things that help them, that benefit Disney. Yeah, it's not the same argument here, but I'll let him continue.
What is basically happening. So let me set the stage. We can heard about this. Basically, Disney came out last year and said, hey, we're against a law that's being put in Florida that impacts how children are educated in Florida schools.
I like how that's putting it very gingerly. Let's be very specific. That says that children should not be dealt with graphic sexuality when they are very young. I think that's unambiguous. And frankly, I like to talk to folks and deal with folks who have the moral strength of character to say, yeah, let's all agree, Democrat, Republican, I don't care what your party is, let's agree, let's come out here and have some backbone and spine to say it is wrong to deal with these things with children. It is fundamentally wrong as a society, as a culture, universally. And by the way, I'm here in Asia. People would agree. They'd agree in Latin America. They'd agree in Africa. They should agree in Europe. And they should agree, really, everywhere you go, that children should be off limits for sexualization. I don't think that should be ambiguous. But let's continue.
I'm not going to comment on the law one way or the other.
Of course.
Because certainly, yes, the U.S. is taking a very left-leaning turn. I am not Make America Great Again, by the way. I certainly agree with some of the things in there, but I also left over I left for good over Make America Great Again because I realized how it was materially impacting me as an American who did not want to live in the United States. It had negative implications for me, and I thought that they would get worse. And here's one of them. So I understand. Okay,
so I'm going to pause here. I don't know what point he's trying to make about Make America Great or Trump that was worse. Frankly, if I will say this, as somebody who lives abroad, look, if there was a regulatory scheme where, we had a government that was consistently reducing taxes, that would be an incentive for a lot of expats to come back, right? If the tax burdens were being lifted, if it looked like things were on a federal level, the regulations were getting lifted, that'd be great. Unfortunately, we've had more and more and more and more regulation. And I think generally, and perhaps where even and Andrew and I might agree to a certain extent, is that a lot of regulation needs to be lifted. Now, trying to put that blame on Trump, That's really weird. Trying to say that Trump is the sole cause of that? Yeah, I think we need to be intellectually honest here and say, look, the chief and majority cause of the regulation and regulatory schemes and bodies is the left, not the right. But let's continue.
People on the side of the issue that the people on the right have. So basically, Disney said, hey, we are against this bill.
Uh-huh.
And you can be for it, you can be against it. Mm-hmm. I don't blame you either way. But what the governor of Florida then did was say, to punish you, we're going to go through and say, oh, you have this special district that Disney had. And I went kind of deep on Disney in 2020.
Hold on. What do you say over there? Oh, I went deep on Disney. So he revealed what it really is there. And we're going to get to this. But what it really is there, he says, I went deep on Disney. When he says that, that's very specific, meaning he is invested in Disney. He's financially invested in Disney. And what did we just have? We had a giant drop. In fact, I'll pop this open here for a second just so you guys see this, because it's worth noting here that here we go. This is the Walt Disney Company. Yeah, that's how we're looking right now. No bueno. So obviously, look, I understand dollars and cents, and I'm never going to fault anybody for being concerned about economics, being concerned about the economics of Disney. But really the solution here is, if you're concerned about the economics of Disney, is, hey, Disney, get back to making good movies, get back to making good media, and stop worrying so much about politics. That's really what all companies should be doing, whether it's Anheuser-Busch or Disney or any other company. And look, I served as corporate counsel, and I can tell you straight up from inside of these corporations and from talking with other in-house counsels, yeah, it's causing a problem. This woke stuff, it is slowing things down. It is slowing corporations down. It's bloating them. It's creating friction. It's creating tension. It's creating costs. It's not effective, efficient. It's not the best for America. It's not the best for American business. So, yes, certainly get woke, go broke is absolutely a thing here. But I'll let this continue to play.
Stuff from Michael Eisner back in the 90s and Bob Iger, good book that he wrote, whether you agree with him on everything or not. Disney has been an incredible success story in the last 20 years. It's really come back. They create so.
Okay, hold on one second. Let's stop here, just for a hot minute. Also, I love that. By the way, his editors, I believe this isn't even. Okay, no, this is indeed Disney right there. But point of the matter is that they've made a comeback, but they've come back and tanked a lot of their intellectual properties. They bought Star Wars, right? Okay, big win buying Star Wars, that's great. And then they proceeded to tank it. They bought Marvel, they did well at first, and now they're screwing the pooch. We talk about this on Valiant Renegade, WW Pro. Time and time again, Disney is failing. They're bombing in the box office. And what I mean bombing is, it's not that they're not making any money. No, of course they're making money, but they're not making what they could make if they just made good stories and kept out the woke politics, right? There's a premium that they're paying every single time they inject these things in at the cost of a good story. So I would say, I don't think he's really been paying attention to this. I think these corporate shills, all they do is pay attention to the stock price. And to be very fair, this is part of a lot of people's portfolios because they view Disney as a stable stock. It's like a Coca-Cola to them, right? So they've got money in it. And it's always very ironic when I talk to people abroad, particularly a person who would be abroad trying to minimize his taxes and pay zero taxes, but he's got significant American investments. So he's trying to, much like Disney, have his cake and eat it too. But let's continue.
So many jobs in Florida. And they had a deal with Florida that, hey, we have this own special district, the Reedy Creek Improvement District, and we're going to run our affairs how we want. And that, you would say they've been a pretty good citizen. So
there's where I would contend with him a little bit. That is not exactly how it is. Now, of course, yes, they did have to set up, they'd have to build and construct things in Orange and Osceola County when it was undeveloped. However, does that mean that they can do whatever they want whenever they want? No. And of course, the state, it's a delegation of power. And this is the thing that a lot of people don't understand about the law. And to be very clear, Andrew's not a lawyer, so I don't fault him for not understanding legal stuff, which non-lawyers, I give them more slack. So I get it, Andrew, you don't understand. So let me explain this to you. So when you live somewhere, for example, he's living in Malaysia, right? There might be a city in Malaysia. The sovereign, right, the state, the nation can delegate power to a city. Just like in the United States, there's power that belongs to the federal government, there's power that belongs to the states. Everything below the states derives its power from the state, whether it's a city, whether it's a county, or a special district. And at any time, the state can take that away. In fact, there's many states that have gotten rid of counties, that effectively don't have counties anymore. There's just cities in the state, and that's it. And that's perfectly fine. That's the state's ability. If the state looks at a situation and says, this delegation of power isn't working for us, it is fully within their right to take it back. That's like employment at will. Right? So employment at will, a concept of, hey, look, you can work for me as long as you want. I can work for you as long as I want. Whenever you want to quit, you can want to quit. Isn't that supposed to be the optimal condition for business? Isn't that supposed to be great? But what Andrew wants is sort of corporate welfare that's baked in there forever. So, for example, if a corporation gets a subsidy on a stadium and they promise to build a stadium that brings 100,000 jobs to your community, right? And they get a massive tax subsidy. They get millions of dollars off their taxes every single year. In fact, let's just say they live tax-free, but they promise to bring in those jobs, but they never quite bring in all those jobs. Does that mean they get to have it forever because a promise was made back in the day? No, of course. These things can be retracted. These things can be brought back in. And this is a delegation of power. We're dealing with a delegation of powers issue that he doesn't realize. The other thing is that I think it is a big misnomer to talk about Disney in terms of both the size and in terms of their economic effect on their neighbors. I would say that Disney has had a great economic effect on Disney, and certainly, yes, a lot of development in Florida has benefited from that. But I can tell you, as a person whose grandparents came down and bought land in 1920, long before Walt Disney was ever in Florida, Florida would have been developed one way or another. Florida is a lovely state. People retire there for a reason because, well, it's much better than living in the snow. We've got air conditioning. We've got a lot of outdoor activities, beautiful beaches, some of the world's best beaches, great activity, relative freedom in your personal life, in what matters, things like not having to wear a mask. Yeah, things like that. So people would have developed Florida anyways. Also, there is a misnomer that Disney is the largest employer in Florida. That's incorrect. It depends on which way you slice the pie, but there's several other large employers. For example, DHL has major offices there. But even that aside, Publix supermarkets, Publix has more employees in Florida than Disney. So this is a quote that they're using in a very manipulative manner, right? And sometimes they'll use it, the largest employer in Central Florida. It's really trying to slice it so they get it perfectly where it looks like they're so big and so important. But mind you, many of those employees are underpaid. Many of those employees live in hotels in abject poverty off of 192 that don't even have enough money to feed themselves. Many of the college students live in essentially student ghettos, which are run down, which are in poor condition. So there's a lot of issues going on with Disney. It isn't all paradise and sunshine for all of their employees and all of their neighbors in Central Florida. That being said, let's hear the rest of this.
They manage everything. They do their own power. They leave everybody alone.
Not so much leave everybody alone. Of course, they do try to get involved. I mean, that's the whole point here, right? So let's continue.
So Ron DeSantis comes in and says, oh, well, you've got your own special deal, so we're going to cancel it because I don't agree with you. Didn't come in on day one. Number one employer in the state, by the way, as I understand. You think if it was a big issue, would come in on day one and say, hey, listen, I'm against this corporate, funny business. We got to go after Disney.
Well, the thing is that it's been something that's been talked about for politicians for a long time. And look, Andrew's not a Floridian. He's never been a Floridian. He doesn't understand Florida, so he doesn't know that this is something that local politicians, state politicians have talked about for a long time. They've discussed repealing Reedy Creek, pushing back these powers, because other places like Universal Studios, SeaWorld, Walt Disney, other places that aren't Walt Disney World, they don't have these powers. It's not fair. It's not equitable. Right? And certainly a small business or a small company would never be given the powers that Reedy Creek had to build a nuclear reactor in an airstrip. No. And what was that based on? A false promise to build a city. They were given all these powers. So it's only right that they repealed it. And by the way, Andrew, crying over this, they didn't go away. They gave them back. They just said, hey, it's going to be controlled. The board is going to be appointed by the state now instead of Disney. They can still run their district. They can still do the same things they're doing. They can still manage them in an excellent manner if they want to. By the way, questionable whether they managed it in an excellent manner. Yes, there are good men and women that work at RCID, at former Reedy Creek, now the Central Florida Tourism Oversight District. Yes, of course, there's good people working there, but a lot of things were overlooked, and we're going to see that as we advance here in looking into Reedy Creek.
Make it a campaign issue, but no. Waited until Disney, whose weak CEO, Bob Chapek, kind of crumbled under the pressure from some of the advocates in his company to speak out against this bill. Waited until it happened to pounce and say, oh, well, you don't agree with me, so I'm going to take away your deal. Now, the Disney company had a deal with the state of Florida because when they came, the place was a swamp. There was nothing. Florida begged and groveled for them to bring their business there. It was
okay, and that's what the part where I want to get and just kind of hammer home here. So Florida did not beg and grovel. In fact, Florida did not need to beg and grovel. In fact, it was pitched in a deceptive manner to Florida to allow them to have such large powers and authorities and everything else to build and have this district, right? To give them this unchecked oversight in this area because they were going to build a city. They were going to build the experimental prototype community tomorrow, which they ultimately never actually realized. Yes, there were other things that they tried to pawn off as that. None of them were that. For example, Epcot Center is not a city. Celebration was DNX, Golden Oak, far from that vision. They've never actually fulfilled their promise of doing what they plan to do, and certainly they didn't need such expansive powers. So when the governor ultimately just ends up swapping out the districts, right? A Disney-controlled district for a state-controlled district, there's no loss, there's no harm. Disney has suffered no damages. There's been no damage to business here. And the one thing you have to understand is, look, you are not above the law. And the law ultimately in every country should be made by the people, by the regular everyday people who come together and say, this is fundamentally wrong. And the fact that corporations and their shills, which feel like, hey, we're millionaires and billionaires, we're above you, the rules don't apply to me, I get to do what I want, I get to go where I want, I get to do what I want, and you're messing with my investment, well, we're going to smear you in the media, we're going to attack you on every single channel in every single direction. Yeah, that's not what is best for any country anywhere in the world. Whenever you see a big corporation exploiting the people, that's not going to work out. Whether you're in America or whether you're in Malaysia, whether you're in Dubai, anywhere else in the world, it's not going to work out when you have an exploitation and this absolute situation where a large company wants to get away with murder. Guys, make sure you like, subscribe, and I'll be covering this issue much more in depth. Take care. Peace.